I'm writing this under a disposable account because I honestly don't care whether anyone believes me or not. What happened to me feels too surreal, and I need to get it out somewhere. Maybe someone else has gone through something similar. Maybe I'm alone in this. Either way, here it goes. It happened back in July, and I haven't been able to stop replaying it in my head since. Every single night, it comes back to me in flashes. I'll try my best to tell it straight, without exaggeration. A little context first. I'm not exactly what most would call a stable person. I'm a 24-year-old woman living alone in a mid-sized city. I've been diagnosed with BPD and CPTSD, and I've dealt with a lot of loss in my life. I'm not close to my family, and I don't see my friends often. It's not unusual for me to spend weeks barely interacting with anyone outside of work. At the time this happened, I had been in one of those isolated stretches, just me, my apartment, and silence. At the beginning of July, I suddenly got this strange, overwhelming urge to go camping under the stars. I can't explain why. I hadn't been camping for years, and I didn't even own any gear. But the impulse wouldn't let me go. After a couple of days fighting it, I gave in. I searched online for good stargazing spots within driving distance and found a small campsite out in Nevada, about 4 hours into the desert. It had a reputation for its pitch-black skies. Only one slot was available for the weekend, so I booked it without hesitation. The day before the trip, I rushed around town buying everything I thought I'd need. A cheap tent, sleeping bag, camping chair, some food. The next day I packed my car and headed out, not exactly knowing why I was doing it, but feeling like I had no choice. By the time I finally arrived, the sun was already sliding behind the horizon. My terrible sense of timing struck again. To make things worse, I realized I had forgotten my charger at home, and my phone battery was already at 60%. No service out there anyway, so I figured I'd just stretch what I had left until I returned the next day. My plan wasn't complicated. Sit in my chair, listen to some music, and spend the night looking at the sky. I had chosen that night deliberately, new moon. That meant the sky would be as dark as possible, the stars brightest. But because I was running late, I had to set up my tent fast before I lost all light. The campsite wasn't empty. There were plenty of other groups there, but most were families with kids. I could hear parents reading bedtime stories in their tents, even a few softly singing hymns. I caught glimpses of people reading on tablets before their lanterns went dark. Within minutes, it seemed the entire campground had gone to sleep. It struck me as odd. Here we were, in one of the clearest dark sky reserves in the state, and not a single other person was outside watching the stars. No telescopes, no cameras, not even anyone sitting out on a chair like me. I expected at least one other stargazer. But no, everyone tucked in as soon as the sun set. I figured it made sense in its own way. This was the desert. If they wanted to be awake for sunrise, to avoid sleeping through the unbearable morning heat, going to bed early was logical. By around 10 p.m., my tent was up, my chair was planted, and the world around me was eerily silent. The only signs of life were a family near me still murmuring scripture, and a group of people gathered near the public bathroom, their flashlights occasionally cutting through the dark. My tent was at the edge of the site. To my left stretched nothing but desert, cliffs, and endless sky. In front of me, about 100 feet away, was the restroom building with its bright white lights. Beyond that, 2 other campsites sat, maybe 300 feet away. Behind me was the rest of the campground, and far back in the opposite corner, another restroom glowing faintly in the distance. Now, here's the part where I admit something that'll sound reckless. I hadn't come out here just for the stars. For months, I'd been wrestling with grief from the previous year. People I loved, gone, along with too much pain to carry. Sometimes, in moments like that, psychedelics help me find some kind of closure. That night, in that desert, that was my real goal. I had brought mushrooms with me. Just 2 grams, enough for a gentle trip. By 11 p.m., I was already coming up. And before you write off everything I'm about to say as drug-induced, let me be clear, I have a lot of experience with psychedelics. More than I'd like to admit. I've tripped dozens of times on mushrooms, over 100 on acid. I keep journals. I've recorded myself during trips. I know my patterns, my mind, my hallucinations. And I had never seen or felt anything remotely like what happened that night. No entities, no delusions. Just colors, textures, a flood of emotions, peace. That's it. What I encountered in the desert wasn't born from the mushrooms. It just happened while I was on them. By the time the mushrooms were taking hold, The whole campsite felt deserted. The family's tent had gone silent, and the only movement came from the groups lingering near the restroom. Their flashlights kept sweeping across the ground, but they never seemed to go anywhere. I sat in my hammock chair, trying to relax, but soon I had to pee. Normally I wouldn't hesitate, but the people hanging around the bathrooms put me on edge. After pacing a bit, I decided to just go and hope no one bothered me. Luckily, they didn't. I finished, headed back, and started walking toward my tent. That's when I froze. In the dark outline of my camp spot, I saw my chair, and standing right next to it was a figure. Motionless, just staring at the chair. At first I thought maybe they were curious about my setup. Maybe they wandered over by accident. I raised my hand to wave, but they didn't react. I took a few steps closer. The crunch of my shoes must have alerted them, because suddenly their head snapped in my direction. They took 3 deliberate steps toward me, then abruptly stopped, shuffled backward 6 more steps, and pulled out a small bluish flashlight, shining it directly into my eyes. Before I could even process what was happening, they spun on their heel and quickly walked toward another figure I hadn't noticed before, standing just 15 feet away in the shadows. The 2 of them stood together, shining their odd blue lights down at their own feet, then without a word walked off toward the restroom and disappeared into the women's side. I stood there, heart pounding, feeling stupidly exposed. Why the hell would 2 strangers be standing silently in my campsite in the middle of the night? What were they doing? Trying to calm myself, I sat down and put my headphones on. Music would help, I thought. Focus on the stars. That's why I came here. But the strangeness didn't stop. For the next half hour, I kept noticing flashlights flickering around the women's restroom. People walking in and out, their beams zigzagging in every direction, but never actually leaving. Sometimes they'd turn their lights off and just walk straight into the dark, away from the campground entirely, into empty desert where no sights existed. It wasn't just unsettling, it felt wrong. Then, something closer. I pulled out my earbuds when I sensed movement. To my right, just a few feet away, another silhouette, standing perfectly still, watching. They inched closer, 2, maybe 3 steps. Then, just like the others, they backed away, circled around me, and vanished into the dark without a flashlight. Now I was officially spooked. I wasn't thinking aliens or anything like that yet. Just danger. The nearest town was hours away. If a group of people wanted to mess with me out here, there was nothing stopping them. So I stayed alert. Headphones off, body tense, eyes scanning every direction. The stars overhead glittered brilliantly, but I couldn't relax. By midnight, the whole campground seemed to sleep. The bathroom was dark, no more flashlights. For the first time that night, I thought maybe things would settle. But then came the sounds. A low droning hum, like a jet passing somewhere far off, only it would vanish and reappear without warning. I searched the sky for aircraft lights, but found nothing. Then came the booms, deep, resonant, not like thunder. Each one rippled through the air in a way that made my chest seize, my body tense. The ground didn't shake, but the vibrations felt like they were everywhere inside me. Off in the desert to my left, where no campsites existed, I thought I heard laughter. Faint, but distinct. I told myself to stay calm. Breathe. Just enjoy the stars. Don't spiral. And then I saw them. Above the cliffs on the horizon, a small cluster of glowing orbs appeared, swirling around one another like fireflies. My whole body went cold. This wasn't drones. This wasn't planes. Nothing moved like that. In my head, clear as if I'd spoken it aloud, a thought burst forth. Don't record this. You'll ruin it. Just watch. It startled me. Not just the idea, but the fact I hadn't even been thinking of recording. It was like the thought had been put there, planted before I had time to consider it. And so I sat, transfixed. Another group of orbs appeared on the opposite side of the sky. The first cluster shot across instantly, merging with them in a burst of light. My jaw dropped. For the first time in years, I felt it. That childlike wonder, that desperate belief I'd buried long ago. Proof. Something beyond us. Something real. I kept checking myself. This isn't the mushrooms, right? You're not hallucinating this. This is real. Over and over, convincing myself it was true. And deep down, I knew it was. The humming grew louder, and for the first time I spotted aircraft lights overhead. A jet, unmistakable. But the lights weren't blinking like they should. They glowed steady as the plane vanished into a dark cloud I hadn't noticed before. The hum faded with it. The orbs, however, kept dancing. For nearly an hour they spun, merged, darted, and blinked out, only to reappear again. I couldn't look away. Around 1 a.m., my body reminded me of something much less cosmic. I had to pee. I resisted as long as possible, not wanting to miss anything, but eventually I caved. Now, something relevant. I'm a trans woman. Most people can't tell, but in moments like this it still complicates things. Normally I'd use the women's restroom, but after what I'd seen earlier, paranoia gnawed at me. If anyone confronted me, I'd rather it happen in the men's. So that's where I went. The building was dead silent as I walked in. I hurried to a urinal and unzipped. The instant I started, the door slammed open. A short man, maybe 5 feet 6 inches, brown hair, sickly face, rushed in without looking up. He darted into the stall beside me and shut the door hard. I froze. Every instinct screamed danger. A stranger, in the middle of nowhere, barging in at 1 a.m. while I stood there vulnerable. But then something even stranger. He peed for maybe 3 seconds. That's it. After all that rush, all that urgency, 3 seconds. Then he sat in there pulling toilet paper slowly, deliberately, as if just making noise. I tried to hurry, but of course when you're nervous, your body won't cooperate. It felt like forever before I finally finished. For some reason, I even went to wash my hands, though every nerve told me to leave. The stall door banged open. He shot out, planted himself at the sink next to me, splashed water on his hands for 2 seconds, and bolted out the door. I stood there, heart hammering. Rationally, maybe he was just tripping too, or drunk. Maybe he thought I was the strange one. But the whole thing unsettled me to my core. When I stepped back outside, things only got weirder. The lights in both bathrooms, men's and women's, suddenly snapped off, plunging everything into darkness. No one walked in or out. The only glow left came from a single yellow bulb above the park ranger's bulletin board on the side of the building. I sat back down in my chair, staring at the sky, daring more strangeness to come. And it did. The jets returned, louder than before. The orbs appeared again, this time encircling the entire campground in a loose ring of pulsing light. They expanded, then shrank, drifting silently around us. I should have run, hidden in my tent, done anything but sit frozen. But I couldn't. Curiosity outweighed fear. This was once in a lifetime. The desert filled with unsettling sounds, faint shouting, a baby crying somewhere far, far away. In the trees near my tent, a glow shimmered like moonlight. But it was a new moon. By 2 a.m., the men's restroom lights flickered back on, but the women's stayed dark. My nerves were shredded. The only words slipping out of my mouth were panicked mantras. I'm so stupid. Why am I still here? This is insane. I'm a dumb bitch. I should have left. Still, I didn't move. And then came the moment that truly broke me. From nowhere, a figure emerged, walking slowly in front of the bathroom. At first I thought it was just another person. But as my eyes adjusted, my stomach dropped. They weren't normal. They were impossibly tall. Easily 12, maybe 13 feet. The restroom building was about that height, and their head reached nearly to the ventilation window, their crown taller than the roof itself. I stared, paralyzed, as they walked past the bathroom and disappeared into the dark. That was it. My limit. Nope. Nope, 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 nope. Fuck this. I'm done. I muttered it out loud, almost chanting, as I bolted from my chair and dove into my tent, zipping it shut as fast as my shaking hands allowed. The fear that hit me then was primal, animalistic. I've lived with daily anxiety, with trauma that makes terror a familiar companion. But this was different. It was the feeling of realizing you're not at the top of the food chain, that something far smarter, far more dangerous, had noticed you, and you were prey. I curled up in my sleeping bag, shaking, listening as heavy footsteps circled my tent. The footsteps didn't just circle. They paused, sped up, scurried. The weight of them pressed into the silence, too deliberate to be an animal. My chest clenched as if my body already knew. This is it. You're not alone anymore. And then it happened. The voice. Not out loud. Not in my ears. Inside. Parallel to my own thoughts, weaving through them like threads. It wasn't speech. It was concepts. Pure feeling, arriving fully formed. The way a memory suddenly crashes into your mind. We talked, if you can call it that. They wanted me to know they were aware of my fear. They told me they were afraid too. Afraid of us. But curious. I asked, or rather, I thought, about the jets I'd seen. Were they ours? Were we trying to find them? The answer came back sharp, direct. Yes. But we'll never succeed, I thought. We aren't smart enough to catch you. You're smart, they corrected. But not creative. The words cut, but not cruelly. Almost like a teacher telling a child a hard truth. They admitted they liked me, not for courage, but for honesty. I wasn't pretending not to be afraid. I was trembling, admitting it, hiding in a thin nylon shell of a tent. And they respected that. Still, they teased me. When I asked their name, their purpose, why they were here, they ignored me. Or sometimes they'd twist it back, as if enjoying the game of withholding. I pushed harder. What do you want? The answer landed heavy in my chest. Freedom. For you. For us. But it's complicated. I argued back. Of course I ran. I'm still an animal with instincts. Survival comes first. Fear is natural. They agreed. But beneath it all, they pulsed with something else. Not menace. Not malice. Love. Not the flimsy human kind. Not romantic or parental. Something vast, unconditional. They projected it into me so fiercely I nearly sobbed. They call me family. They told me I had chosen this. That phrase stuck. You chose this. The moment it sank in, flashes from my childhood bubbled up, half-formed memories I couldn't piece together. The meaning slipped away as soon as I tried to grab it. For a long time, we stayed like that, me curled in my tent, them circling outside, voices braided together inside my skull. Time distorted. At one point, when I glanced at my phone, the clock read 11 a.m. Impossible. It was still the middle of the night. My phone had never glitched like that before. It felt like a cruel confirmation, reality itself bending, mocking me. Eventually, my body forced me up again. I crawled out to pee, expecting to be ambushed. But nothing happened. Just the desert, still and vast. Back inside, I shoveled a handful of trail mix into my mouth, shaking. I opened my voice recorder and mumbled everything I could remember, desperate to anchor it before it evaporated like a dream. Outside, the mischief resumed. Orbs flickered in the trees. The restroom lights blinked on and off, sometimes both at once, sometimes only one. Every time I thought the night was settling, they would nudge it again, just to remind me I wasn't alone. By the time the horizon softened with the first hint of dawn, the presence was gone. The orbs had melted into nothing. The desert was silent. I sat there until the sun broke fully over the cliffs, stunned, hollow, and yet strangely full. Then I packed my things, got into my car, and drove home, carrying the weight of a night I knew I could never fully explain. There are 1,000 little details I've skipped, because this is already too long and honestly exhausting to put into words. But that's the story. And look, I don't expect anyone to take me at face value. I know how it sounds. I was on mushrooms. I was alone. The desert plays tricks on the mind. If you want to dismiss it as a drug-fueled hallucination, I won't argue. I welcome skepticism, because I know I'd feel the same way reading this. But here's the truth I can't shake. I've tripped more times than I care to admit. Mushrooms, acid, you name it. I've had peaceful trips, chaotic trips, emotional trips. Never once have I seen entities. Never once have I hallucinated voices or imagined beings around me. My visions are always the same. Colors, patterns, heightened feelings. That's it. What happened that night was not the shrooms. The trip didn't cause it. It just happened to occur while I was on them. And I believe, with everything in me, that what I experienced was real. I left that desert humbled. The arrogance I didn't even know I carried. The assumption that humanity was alone, that the universe was cold and indifferent. It shattered. I believe again. Not in gods, not in fairy tales, but in others. In family, even, in some strange way. The memory of their presence still lingers in me. The feeling of that unconditional love, that bizarre, immense tenderness. The way they call me family. The way they insisted I had chosen this, though I don't yet understand what that means. Since that night, I've carried a sense of home inside me I never had before. Like I belong to something larger, though I can't define it. Do I want to see them again? Absolutely. Even knowing the fear, the primal terror of realizing how small I am compared to them, I would endure it again for even one more moment of that connection. So that's it. That's my confession. Has anyone else out there met them? Experienced that same overwhelming presence? If so, I want you to know you're not alone. They're out there. They exist. And they're watching.